A rare World War II tank was found buried in mud in Poland's Vat River. The British Valentine tank was an amazing discovery. But far beneath the frozen surface of the Barents Sea, Russian Navy divers found something so scary it shocked the entire recovery crew. What started as a normal underwater mission became a puzzling mystery when sonar detected strange, angular objects on the sea floor. This is part of the Sherman tank's story, but it's a version built in Canada under the Commonwealth's Accelerated Production Program. As the divers went down, they saw a frightening sight: the rusty but clear shapes of American Sherman tanks perfectly lined up as if they had stopped mid-battle. When the military found tanks in the ocean, nobody expected this. These tanks weren't just old relics. They were part of a secret wartime shipment lost for more than 70 years. And as the divers pulled up the first tank, with corroded steel revealing faded markings and traces of the original olive drab paint, they went pale when they discovered what else was down there. This wasn't just wreckage. It was a hidden Cold War secret buried by salt and time. The Barents Sea doesn't usually give up its dead, but in August 2021, a sonar beep broke decades of silence. It was the Russian Northern Fleet doing routine Arctic sonar testing near the Kola Peninsula that made the discovery. The screen lit up with symmetrical shapes, reported Naval Officer Petrov. They were long, rectangular, and strangely uniform, like nothing in our underwater warfare manuals. Navy officers first thought it was leftover cargo from a wartime supply ship, perhaps one of the many Liberty ships that braved the Murmansk run. But as divers went down into the freezing depths at about 310 feet below sea level, they realized they were looking at something completely different. Something whole. Something chilling. A sunken Liberty ship lay on its side, half buried in mud. But it wasn't the ship that surprised everyone. It was what stuck to its exposed cargo deck like iron barnacles, rows of American M4 Sherman tanks, their shapes unmistakable even under layers of ocean dirt. They weren't scattered randomly. They were perfectly lined up, chained to the deck with naval anchor chains, gun barrels locked in formation as if still heading to battle. Then came the moment that changed everything. One diver opened a tank's hatch using standard Navy bolt cutters. Inside, protected in wax-sealed boxes marked with Ordnance Department stamps, were perfect ammunition rounds, live, labeled and dated March 1945. A small envelope lay on top, faded but whole. It read simply, Phase 3, Operation Deliverance. But here's the mystery. Operation Deliverance doesn't exist in any declassified U.S. or Soviet World War II documents. When I saw that envelope, my blood ran cold, said the Russian diver. Not because it might explode, but because of the heavy weight of secrecy. Back on land, Russian naval intelligence classified the find immediately under Protocol 7 procedures. Military historians were flown in, some pretending to be ocean consultants. Was this an abandoned weapon shipment meant for Soviet allies under the Lend-Lease program? A secret aid deal never disclosed, or something far more hidden? What made the discovery even more perplexing were the conditions that had preserved everything so remarkably well. Unlike most wrecks in the Barents Sea, the tanks were bizarrely well preserved. Very little rust. Paint chips were still visible, showing traces of the standard Army olive drab. Marine biologists noted something even stranger. The surrounding seabed was sterile. No barnacles, no algae, no sea life at all. As if this forgotten convoy had created its own underwater quarantine. Further dives revealed more oddities. A sealed steel box in the engine room had an embossed symbol, a bald eagle holding a laurel branch, the classic War Department insignia. Inside were handwritten documents, all with the same coded signature, MUN directive, eyes only. None of the recovered personnel could confirm which American department MUN referred to. As excavation continued, one strange pattern kept repeating. Every artifact found was dated within a narrow window, March 3rd to March 27th, 1945, just weeks before VE Day. Why rush an entire tank convoy across dangerous seas with no escort and no record? A sealed command brief recovered from a waterproof locker had only one word on its cover: containment. By the second dive, the naval base was buzzing with energy and worry. Files were redacted faster than they were read using standard NKVD protocols. Everyone had the same question. What was Operation Deliverance? The term was printed twice on tags around cargo boxes. Phase 3, Operation Deliverance, authorized via Allied Accord. The twist: no such accord exists in World War II records. And Phase 3 suggests at least two other stages. American ocean historians were brought in under the Joint Polar Research Treaty. But these weren't typical academics. They wore clean suits and had no press meetings, arriving on unmarked C-130 transport planes. Only one ever spoke to the Russian press briefly and left mid-question when asked about the tank's markings. Were these tanks ever meant to reach the Soviets? Asked a reporter. An interpreter confirmed this phrase made the official visibly turn pale. Several recovered boxes contained unusual documents, some in both English and Russian, some in coded shorthand resembling wartime cipher protocols. One had "Eyes Only, R. Mitchell" carved on its surface. Internal U.S. declassified memos from 1944 mention a Robert Mitchell, a logistics officer rumored to have arranged unauthorized shipments to Eastern Europe. Historian Dr. Rebecca Harrison reviewed decoded memos. One passage read, "Cargo rerouted to North Corridor under directive fire seal. High contamination risk. No entry without H-grade sealant. Manhattan Project protocols in effect. Final destination pending Moscow clearance. Contamination. Sealants." This wasn't just about weapons anymore. The true shock came with the third Sherman tank lifted from the ocean floor. Its engine had been replaced with a sealed metallic core and magnetic shielding reminiscent of early radar countermeasures. At the center was a metal cylinder wrapped in insulation and black tape with a faded inscription, "Non-terrestrial sample, handle with care." That line triggered an emergency shutdown of dive operations following standard atomic safety procedures. The sample sparked a frenzy among international observers. Military theorists wondered if this was Cold War nuclear containment technology. Others leaned toward the paranormal. A retired intelligence officer, speaking anonymously, confirmed he'd seen references to a deliverance manifest in 1957, a list of experimental shipments never meant to be traced through normal Army quartermaster channels. They weren't just tanks, he said. They were mobile test units. If they went off course, protocol was to erase all proof, ocean drop included. In following weeks, Russian naval activity increased across the Barents Sea. Surveillance drones were deployed following Northern Fleet standard patterns. The American team was flown out quietly on military transports. To this day, the Kremlin denies any military significance, calling it a historic anomaly. One officer, interviewed off the record, told a fellow crew member, "They turned pale when they found it." And not because it was a tank, but because it wasn't just a tank. When investigators finally gained access to examine the Sherman's interior more closely using standard recovery protocols, they discovered the extent of its mysteries. The Sherman's exterior was battered but whole, showing typical Atlantic corrosion patterns. The hatch was sealed shut, not welded, just sealed tightly with military-grade weather stripping. It took nearly 6 hours and 4 crew members with precision tools to break it open. Inside was silence, then the metallic groan of air escaping after decades underwater. The tank's interior was eerily preserved, covered in a thick layer of mud like it had been flash-frozen in time. First, the weapons. 3 M1 carbines were strapped in weapon racks according to standard Army field manual specifications, swollen with water damage but with unnatural decay patterns. Parts of the wood were perfect, while barrels looked nearly melted. Second, the maps. 6 maps were folded in a sealed compartment, most showing Baltic troop movements and standard NATO grid references, but one stood out with no landscape features, only red ink coordinates in a triangle formation extending far beyond 1945 operation zones. One triangle point matched the shipwreck's exact location. Another pointed north of Greenland. The third was completely off the map. The third item was most puzzling. A sealed metal case labeled in Russian. Control Journal. Object 317 with Soviet military stamps. Inside, a handwritten booklet logging multiple tank recovery missions dated years before this Sherman was reported lost. All entries ended with, "Not viable." When they examined for crew remains, there were none. No bones, no DNA, just perfect indentations in leather seats and a strange chemical smell despite no visible residue. Hidden behind the driver's seat, concealed in a panel designed for radio equipment, were 5 photographs that would deepen the mystery even further. One showed a military group beside a tank with an Arctic background and men wearing winter parkas with no visible insignia. Another showed a massive ice-covered dome structure with unknown architecture. The last 3 were completely black but shimmered under infrared light with geometric patterns. When military archivists tried to catalog the photos using standard Army classification procedures, files were promptly reclassified. The tank was moved to a secure hangar. The final report stated simply, "Contents recovered. Crew unknown. Origin anomalous. Further inquiry postponed." As investigators tried to piece together the tank's origins, they turned their attention to the vessel that had carried it. When crews pulled the Sherman from waters off Sakhalin Island using standard naval recovery equipment, the question became, what ship carried it? Using sonar, divers located broken remains of a transport vessel 120 meters away. The ship had a name painted on the stern, USS Thomas Donaldson. Here's the strange part. The Thomas Donaldson was officially declared sunk in March 1945 near Murmansk, after being torpedoed by U-boat U-968. Historical records show it transported military supplies to the Soviet Union under Lend-Lease provisions. But original Admiralty records place the wreck hundreds of miles northwest, far from Sakhalin. So either this wreck wasn't the Thomas Donaldson, or there was a second vessel, undocumented and virtually identical, sent to Soviet waters under deep secrecy. Structural analysis revealed compelling overlaps with standard Liberty ship construction, but with key differences. No hull serial number matching maritime commission records. Non-standard steel reinforcement in the cargo hold. No lifeboat mounts or crew quarters in typical locations following merchant marine specifications. It was designed to deliver, not survive. Documents in a watertight compartment listed farming and motor equipment using standard shipping manifests, but beneath were mysterious references. Cargo 17, restricted delivery to Vladivostok, and ARM TNK Sherman v PRFX URN 12, modified Sherman tanks for Arctic or chemical warfare conditions. The tank's variant wasn't standard M4A3 production. Reinforced treads, customized exhaust for high salt exposure, thermal shielding for chemical or radioactive environments. Theories swirled. Some believed it was a ghost ship created to deliver experimental equipment under full deniability following OSS protocols. Others argued it was redirected from Murmansk to the Pacific due to intelligence leaks. The most chilling theory, this ship was never meant to return. The investigation took its most disturbing turn after months of controlled silence, when the military's recovery mission ended abruptly in October 2017, following emergency protocols. Behind closed doors, whispers continued. The ship had no proper Lloyd's registry, no consistent logs in naval operations archives. Every historical lead dead-ended. What they discovered was a compartment sealed from inside, invisible unless you knew where to look. A sealed chamber below the engine hold, found only because of a sonar anomaly. Getting inside took hours of careful dismantling using naval cutting torches, recalled Chief Diver Volkov. What we found made us turn pale. A chair bolted to the steel floor with restraints still locked using military-grade hardware. Beside it, a rusted panel of switches. Dials displayed readings that made no sense. None matched 1940s technology or standard electrical specifications. A small glass capsule lay cracked on the floor with handwritten symbols etched on its side. Not English, not Russian, not any alphabet experts could confirm. No human remains, just an imprint on leather and a single unmarked medallion with an odd spiraled pattern. Metallurgists couldn't determine its origin using standard analysis. The operation was ordered to halt following emergency security directives. The chamber was resealed. All photos confiscated under military classification procedures. One diver resigned the next morning. Another was transferred to Murmansk Naval Base. The rest remained silent. "We were told to forget what we saw," whispered one crew member. "But how do you forget something like that?" Reports were filed under nondescript codes in naval archives. Publicly, it was called successful artifact recovery. Privately, it was marked inconclusive following standard investigation protocols. Weeks later, sonar picked up faint metallic interference beneath the wreck site, despite everything being removed. When divers returned using standard recovery procedures, they found nothing. No debris, not even sediment indentations where the wreck had settled, as if it had never been there. Files remain sealed in classified military archives. Some say the ship was a Cold War decoy. Others whisper it covered clandestine experiments beyond normal Manhattan Project scope. A few believe it was never military at all, but a decoy hiding something far older. Whatever the truth, when the military discovered tanks in the ocean, they turned pale at what lay inside. Then they stopped asking questions. No press releases, no museum handoffs, just silence following standard security protocols. That tank, that ship, it wasn't just a wreck. It was a message, and someone wanted it found only once. The ocean gives up its secrets on its own terms and sometimes takes them back just as quickly. If this discovery sent chills down your spine, imagine what else is hiding beneath the waves. Did you enjoy this story? Do you think some secrets are better left buried at the bottom of the ocean? Let us know in the comments below. If you liked the story, subscribe to this channel and leave a like. The ocean keeps its secrets for a reason. Sometimes the mystery is more important than the answer. Thanks so much for listening. See you in the next video. Have a great day.